There are moments in life that hit so hard they leave you speechless, not because they're beautiful, but because they're heartbreaking. This is one of those moments. In just a few seconds, 242 lives vanished aboard Air India, Flight 171. Families broken apart, dreams cut short, and all of us left asking, how could this happen? Hi, I'm your name. And in this video, I want to go deeper than the headlines, because this isn't just a story about a plane crash. It's about people, about choices, and about moments that changed everything. This isn't about fear. It's not about blame. It's about understanding. Because when something goes wrong, 625 feet above the ground, it's never just one thing. It's a mix of decisions, reactions, systems, and split-second calls, made by people, human beings, just like us. So what really happened to Flight 171? Let's start with what we know. This was a routine flight, a scheduled trip from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick. On board were 231 passengers and 11 crew members, moms, dads, kids, professionals, travelers, people with plans, people with families, people expecting to land safely. The plane they were on? A Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Not an old aircraft, not one known for issues. This plane was a modern masterpiece, a symbol of how far aviation has come. Quiet, efficient, comfortable. It had flown millions of miles around the globe with no fatal accidents, and it had just come out of maintenance, fresh and ready. But at 1:38 p.m., when it took off from Ahmedabad's airport, something went wrong. Immediately, the aircraft lifted into the air, but barely. It reached just 625 feet before slamming into a residential neighborhood called Meganar. The crash was brutal. A fireball followed. Part of a doctor's hostel was flattened. There were emergency calls, a Mayday alert, but then silence. No one survived. So now we ask the questions that matter. Why? What happened in those 40 seconds? What caused a plane, one of the safest ever built, to fall out of the sky just seconds after takeoff? The investigation is still unfolding. It will take months to uncover every detail. But as someone who spent time in a cockpit, trained for emergencies where every second counts, I can tell you, something was seriously off. Let's talk about what we saw and what that might have meant inside the cockpit. Footage taken by bystanders shows the plane flying disturbingly low. At first glance, it might not look unusual, but to trained eyes, several things stand out, and they're deeply concerning. First, the wings. On takeoff, most planes use flaps, small parts of the wing that extend to help lift the plane off the ground safely at lower speeds. But in the footage, the flaps seem missing. The wings looked clean, as we say. That's a major red flag. Without flaps, the plane would struggle to gain lift, especially during those first few seconds. Then there's the landing gear. At that point in the flight, it should have been starting to retract. That didn't happen. Could it have been pilot error, a forgotten checklist item, or a deeper system failure? We don't know yet, but what we do know is that those first few seconds are some of the most critical in any flight. If something's wrong, there's almost no time to fix it. It's a window where instinct, training, and luck all collide. This video isn't about scaring anyone. It's about honoring the truth, honoring the people we lost, and doing everything we can to prevent it from happening again. Because the skies are meant to be safe. They're meant to take us to new places, not steal away lives. So if you've ever felt nervous stepping onto a plane, I hope this story doesn't increase your fear, but instead helps you understand what really happens behind the scenes and how much care goes into every flight. Aviation is safer today than it's ever been, but that safety comes from learning, from listening, and from never ignoring a single lesson tragedy tries to teach us. And that's why we're here. Once a plane leaves the ground, there's a moment pilots wait for. It's called a positive rate of climb. The instruments show you're safely lifting off, and then the call comes. Positive rate. That's when the pilot says, gear up. It's routine, it's practiced, it's automatic. But in the video of Flight 171, something was off. The landing gear, Still down. Why does that matter? Because when the flaps, which help the plane lift, are pulled in too early, and the landing gear, which adds drag, stays out, you've got the worst possible combination. The aircraft becomes heavy, slow, and difficult to control, especially at low altitude, when every second and every bit of lift is critical. Now, how could this happen? There are a few possibilities. One of them is human error. The takeoff phase is one of the most stressful moments in any flight. Everything happens fast. If the first officer, under pressure, retracted the flaps instead of the gear, or did both too soon, the aircraft could have lost lift just when it needed it most. It's rare, but it happens. Stress, distraction, miscommunication, they can sneak into the cockpit in ways that even experienced pilots sometimes don't see coming. But maybe it wasn't human at all. Another possibility, something broke. A mechanical issue with the flap system, a gear malfunction. If the hydraulics failed, and in the Boeing 787, they're powered by pumps driven by the engines, that could have locked the flaps in place and left the landing gear stuck. Suddenly, the pilots aren't just flying a plane, they're fighting it. Now imagine you're in that cockpit. You're expecting the plane to climb, to respond, to accelerate, but instead it feels heavy, sluggish. You look at the gauges. Everything looks normal, but the altitude isn't rising. You're still too low. You pull back, increase thrust, but the city's getting closer. There's no time to troubleshoot, no room for error. Then impact. That video clip you've seen, the one where the plane seems to barely clear the rooftops, that may not just be a low flight path. That may be the exact moment where everything came apart. Not just for the aircraft, but for two trained professionals doing everything they could. Now let's talk about the theories. When something this devastating happens, we all want answers. But aviation doesn't work that way. It takes time, not just to recover data, but to piece together human actions, mechanical systems, maintenance logs, and clues from the crash site. Still, there are a few working theories. Let's walk through them, not just as possibilities, but through the eyes of a pilot who's lived through high-stress situations like this. Theory 1. Dual engine failure. This is every pilot's worst fear, losing both engines right after takeoff. It's rare, but not impossible. Remember the Miracle on the Hudson? That crew had altitude, experience, and calm. Flight 171? They didn't have that luxury. Some early reports say the pilots radioed a mayday and mentioned engine trouble. That could suggest both engines lost thrust, maybe due to fuel contamination, a sensor failure, or something even deeper like a hydraulic collapse that crippled the engine systems. Theory 2, a mechanical systems failure. The 787 is a cutting-edge jet, but it depends on its complex hydraulic and electrical systems. If something went wrong with the flaps or landing gear hydraulics, the aircraft might have been trapped in the worst possible setup, flaps up, gear down, and no way to fix it in time. And at just 625 feet, there is no time. Theory 3, maintenance error. This aircraft had just come out of refurbishment. That's supposed to mean it was in top shape. But when planes are taken apart and put back together, even by the best teams, there's always a risk that something gets missed. Maybe a valve was misconfigured. Maybe a sensor was faulty. These errors don't always show up during testing. They show up when you need your aircraft to perform during takeoff. Theory 4, pilot error. This is the hardest one to talk about. No one wants to believe human hands could be at fault in a tragedy like this. But as a pilot, I know how easy it is for a routine task to go sideways under pressure. Maybe the flaps were retracted too soon. Maybe a button was hit in the wrong order. It doesn't take recklessness. Just a moment, a lapse, a misheard call-out. What makes this possibility harder to ignore is what's not seen in the crash footage. No signs of asymmetric thrust, no visible yaw. That means the engines may have been working equally, which brings us back to configuration. Wrong settings, wrong timing, and no time to fix them. If both engines on Flight 171 were working, and that's what early footage seems to suggest, then we're left with a haunting possibility. The plane didn't fall from the sky because it lost power, but because it couldn't generate the lift it needed. That combination, Flaps retracted too early, landing gear still down, creates a kind of aerodynamic trap. You're dragging weight, but you don't have the lift to carry it. And that brings us right back to the most difficult possibility to talk about, human error. It doesn't mean recklessness. It doesn't mean incompetence. Sometimes it just means a moment, a flick of the wrong switch, a misunderstood command, a distraction at exactly the wrong second. And that's all it takes. Now let's address something else. The theories floating around online. Some people are saying the plane took off from the wrong part of the runway. Others are claiming the autopilot system kicked in at the wrong time, and some are pointing to past manufacturing issues with the Dreamliner, saying maybe this was always a ticking time bomb. Here's the truth. None of those theories have solid proof. Not yet. And as someone who spent years in this industry, I'll say this. It's easy to jump to conclusions. It's easy to spread a headline, but it's a lot harder and far more important to wait for facts. Because when we rush to blame or grab on to conspiracy theories, we forget what this is really about. The people, the 242 lives lost, the families waiting for answers, the professionals trying to uncover what really happened. So where does that leave us? It leaves us in the toughest place of all, the middle, somewhere between man and machine, somewhere between doing everything right and something still going wrong, somewhere between procedure and unpredictability. It's in this space that aviation lives, and it's in this space that we have to search, slowly, thoroughly, for the truth. A view from the cockpit. Now let me take you somewhere that might help make sense of this. Into the cockpit, not of Flight 171, but of any aircraft during one of its most intense moments, the seconds just after takeoff. You're focused, you're locked in. Every sense is awake. You hear the tower, you feel the engines. You call out procedures in rhythm. It's like muscle memory, positive rate, gear up, airspeed building, maintain climb. It's a dance between precision and calm, even when things get loud and fast. Now imagine something doesn't feel right. You've just lifted off. You're still low. The aircraft is heavy. Maybe it's a hot day. And suddenly it feels like the plane is dragging, not climbing the way it should. You glance at your instruments. The numbers look okay, but your gut, it says something's off. You call for gear up. Maybe nothing happens. Maybe your co-pilot, thinking they're helping, hits the wrong lever. The flaps retract instead of the gear. Or maybe both are triggered at once. Now you've got a problem. No extra lift, tons of drag, and almost no time. You're flying a 500,000-pound machine, and you're still below 1,000 feet. You've got houses ahead, a city skyline, and just seconds to react. I've flown with new co-pilots. I've seen how fast a routine can turn stressful. You think you're saving time by staying ahead of the jet. But in aviation, speed without discipline is dangerous. The aircraft doesn't care how rushed you are. It won't give you grace because you meant well. It just responds to inputs, and it demands precision. I remember a flight years ago where we got a flap warning just after takeoff. Something didn't look right on the display. My gut told me to hold. I told my co-pilot, no changes. Keep the gear down. Let's stay level. We made a wide turn, stayed calm, and came back to land. No drama, but only because we didn't panic. And more importantly, we didn't rush. That's the kind of judgment that comes with time, with experience, and sometimes, yes, with having made your own mistakes before. And that's why my heart breaks for the crew of Flight 171. We don't know what happened in that cockpit, but I can feel what might have happened. I can imagine the adrenaline, the confusion, the moment they realized something was wrong, and the awful, helpless weight of knowing the aircraft wasn't climbing. When you're flying low, with no space ahead, and you're still carrying full weight, you don't get 5 minutes to work the problem. You get maybe 15 seconds. And in that time, a single misstep or a single failure becomes a tragedy. This isn't about blaming anyone. It's about acknowledging how real, how fast, and how fragile those moments are. And most of all, it's about learning. Learning, preventing, and moving forward. Tragedies like this force us to ask difficult questions. Not just about what went wrong, but about how we can stop it from happening again. Let's start with the obvious. Maintenance. Especially after a major refurbishment, an aircraft should go through more than just routine checks. It needs deep inspection, redundant testing, not just signed-off paperwork, but a mindset that says, this is high risk, treat it that way. Because here's the truth. Aircraft don't crash for no reason. When they do, it's almost never just one mistake. It's a chain, a sequence, a combination of events that slowly close off every escape route until there's none left. The only way to break that chain is to catch the first link. That might be a bolt installed wrong, a warning light ignored, a rushed decision, a missed checklist item. The job of investigators and of the aviation community is to find that first link and make sure it never slips through again. And beyond maintenance, training, judgment, culture, pilots need to be trained not just to fly, but to pause, to slow down even in high-pressure situations, to speak up if something feels off, and to trust that no schedule, no procedure, no boss is more important than safety. We owe that to every single person who steps onto a plane. We owe that to the memory of those 242 lives lost. These aren't just stories about systems or procedures, they're about lives. Flight 171 reminds us of something simple but critical. When something goes wrong up there, even something small, it can have a massive impact down here. That's why we have to keep getting better, especially when it comes to the people who fly these planes. First, we need to talk about training. Takeoff might only last a few seconds, but it's one of the most dangerous parts of any flight. There's barely any time to react, so pilots need to be prepared not just for smooth takeoffs, but for the moments when things go wrong. Fast. What if the flaps are in the wrong setting? What if a system fails without warning? What if the engine feels off and you're still under 1,000 feet? These are the moments where lives hang in the balance. Yes, we have simulators, and they're amazing. But we have to go further. We need to start training for chaos, for confusion, for surprise, because that's what real emergencies feel like. Not neat, not scheduled, just pressure, noise, and the need to make the right call in seconds. Second, we need to talk about technology and what it can do to help. Not to replace pilots, but to support them. Imagine a system that says, hey, don't raise the flaps yet. It's too soon. Or one that flashes a warning when something on the plane isn't configured safely for takeoff. That kind of tech already exists, but it's not used everywhere. Why? Budget, bureaucracy, delays in approval? Safety shouldn't be optional. If we can stop even one tragedy by adding a smart alert or system safeguard, it's worth it. But beyond the machines and checklists, there's something deeper here. Flying is built on trust. Trust between passengers and the crew. Trust between pilots and their aircraft. Trust between maintenance workers and the people who fly what they fix. And when trust breaks, anywhere in that chain, the system starts to crack. That's why transparency matters. That's why we can't rush through investigations or jump to blame. We have to move slowly, honestly, and carefully, because every answer we find helps rebuild that trust, piece by piece. Now, maybe you're someone who gets nervous about flying. Maybe a story like this shakes your confidence. So here's something I want you to know. Commercial flying is still one of the safest ways to travel, ever. Statistically, the odds of dying in a plane crash are less than 1 in 11 million. That's not just luck. That's because every time a tragedy happens, the industry learns. It adapts. It tightens procedures. It builds better systems. Every accident becomes a reason to prevent the next one, and that includes Flight 171. That flight is no longer just a line in a report. It's a turning point, a wake-up call, a reminder that even in modern aviation, there's no room for shortcuts, missed details, or silent failures. 242 people boarded that plane. People with families, with birthdays coming up, with jobs, jokes, and plans for tomorrow. They weren't just passengers. They were human beings, and they never made it home. We owe them more than a moment of silence. We owe them progress. Hope doesn't come from pretending things like this won't happen again. Hope comes from knowing that when something does go wrong, we dig deep to make sure it never happens the same way twice. That's how aviation stays safe. That's how we honor the ones we lost. That's how we move forward. If you've made it this far, thank you. I know this hasn't been an easy video to watch, but it's an important one. Behind every headline, 242 killed, 625 feet, 40 seconds, are real people. Names, dreams, lives that didn't deserve to end this way. We may never know every single detail of what happened in those final seconds. But what we do with the questions, that's what defines us. Whether you're a pilot, a passenger, or someone who just cares about human life, we all have a role to play in making sure skies stay safe. For me, this channel, this video, isn't just about planes. It's about responsibility. It's about compassion. It's about learning from pain so we don't repeat it. That's why I tell these stories. And if something in this video helped you, if it made you think differently, feel something real, or just gave you a new perspective, I hope you'll share your thoughts below. Let's talk. Let's listen. Let's grow together. And if you want to help us reach more people with stories that matter, stories that honor the past, inform the present, and protect the future, consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next one. What is your opinion? Please tell us by commenting. Thank you for watching this video.